Okay, we're going to go ahead and start looking at linear shading techniques and linear techniques in general. You should have this handout on texture. There's different ways that you can manipulate line to create different kinds of surfaces. You use an uneven sort of curvy line to do things like burlap, or give structure to things like brick, scales, hair even. It all is about the direction of the line and how you use the line or the dots. And so if you open it up, you can see that there are different kinds of linear shading techniques. The first one is hatching, and with hatching you use lines that go a single direction, and you can change the value through proximity. So the farther apart they are, the lighter the values. The closer they are, the darker the values. You can also do cross-hatching, where you shade in different directions, and of course that could either be with straight or with curved lines, like as contour lines here. You can also do value changes with things that are more inventive, like scribbling, or coming up with your own pattern. And the one that we're going to be concentrating on is the stippling. And so what I did is, on the very back, I have two examples of portrait work, and wanted to see the differences in them. We tend to see lines or hatching, cross-hatching, done on things that are much more cartoony. It's harder to make something with lines look completely realistic. So when we want to do something that's a little bit more gradual, stipple is the right solution, because it will give us some gradual transitions, a little bit more realism. So on the worksheet, we're going to go ahead and practice. First we'll do a scale, and then we'll do a geometric shape. And for the geometric shapes, online as well as in class, I have this handout that you can use as a reference. You can see that the light source is pretty consistent in it, and so you can use that as a reference for yourself. So we're going to just do the stipple section here. We'll do hatching and cross-hatching on another day. There's an example on one side, and then on the other side is where you're going to actually do it. If something's white, you don't need any dots at all. So as it gets darker, you can start to add some dots to it. You want to keep the spacing of your dots pretty consistent, but on the other hand, you also want to make sure that it doesn't necessarily look like a pattern. If everything is done in rows, it's going to seem very mechanical, like a machine made it. You also want to make sure that you use the tip of the pen. If you don't use the tip of the pen, you're going to get dashes and marks that look more like texture than value. And you also want to think about the placing. You don't want to do some far apart and then some cluster together, because when they're clustered together, your eye will go there and you'll think it's texture. So you want to make sure that you're pretty consistent about the spacing, and that as it gets darker, you do more and more dots using the tip of the pencil. You can see that I'm not jabbing it onto the surface. I'm precisely placing them, and then as it gets darker, I'm going to do more and more dots, closer and closer. Now once they start to get super close together, they're going to even start to touch each other, and that's okay. You just want to make sure that they're touching equally in the same value as where you see it. Okay? So there's different amounts of lightness and darkness that you can get to. If we're just doing purely a stipple drawing with no color, no added techniques added to it, you'd want to do this until you could get a rich, dark, sort of blackish tone. On our scientific illustrations, we've already added color and value. It's not going to probably be necessary to make a black using the stipple. But what you can start to do is putting those dots so close together that they are touching and creating dark values. And then what I'm going to have to do is start working on that spacing so that it's more of a gradual sort of technique. Okay, so this is going to take a little bit of time and effort to get it to be to the point where it looks like this, right? So I'm just going to keep working in the dark end until it's a gradual transition. So in this dark section, instead of filling it in black, I am still leaving a little bit of space in between so that I can see that it stops. Okay? But I keep doing this until it looked like this. Okay? Then on the geometric solid, you can see that the light is shining off to the left side. Now you can decide if it's back left or front left. I'm going to do it as a front left. If the light's hitting the top, and let's say this is an object that's not white, I can put down a few dots if I wanted to. right? But it'd be really, really light, so they'd be pretty far apart. Then on the front side here, it'd be a little bit darker because less of the light was shining on it. And so I would use more dots. Keep working on that spacing so that it looks like it's darker than the top, but not irregular. I don't want to put dots that are too close together, you know, like that. And I can keep going in between some of these dots to make it darker as I choose. So I'm kind of using a careful eye to kind of consider where I need to put a few more dots. Okay, then on this side here, it is opposite of the light. So this is where I'm going to go in there and put more and more dots so that I get it to be darker. So a lot of this value on your illustration will already be done. So here you're just really looking and heightening the value. So you'll get out your object and you'll look at it and decide, where do I need to go darker? Where do I need to add cast shadows? And you can add those in. Right? So I can keep going on to this until I have like a nice flat sort of even value that has gradual, that has a kind of a flat, because this is a flat shape. On something that is rounded, you're going to have more gradual transitions. Now on this example, I let it get pretty dark. I think we're actually going to do it a little bit lighter on this one, because on your project you'd already have color and value. So over here, the light's pretty light. I'm not going to do a lot of dots. And then as it gets darker, I'm going to start to sprinkle in a few more dots. I'm going to kind of bring these dots all the way across. And then as I want to place the shadow in, right, it's kind of slightly off sides, I'm going to kind of go in through this section and make a section where it's darker. And you can see where I did a little line there accidentally, wasn't paying attention, and now I'm like, oh, my eye goes there, so now I have to kind of go in and darken it in that section so it looks more natural. So I got to kind of look back at this and go, okay, does it look gradual enough? So I have to do some more dots on the sides here so that it looks like there's a gradual value change. And maybe I even have to go in here in the core of that shadow and add a few more darks as I go through. Okay. On the back side, we're only going to do the sections that have stipple. So we're going to do the plain stipple, we're going to do the stipple with curved lines, and the stipple with flat lines. So you have your resource. This time the light source is on the right. So you're going to have it where it's lighter. So in your light section, you're probably not going to have any stipple. So as it gets darker, you're going to just use the tip of the pen to sprinkle in a few more dots, and then you're going to put in more dots in the shadow section. So it depends on how dark you need to get there. You're going to have kind of like a crescent sort of shape, right? Like a crescent shape for the shadow. You're going to go in and add your dots. And make some gradual transitions. So I'm going to have to sprinkle some dots here so it feels gradual. So I can kind of go into here as much as I want into the core of the shadow, make it as deep and dark as I wish. Okay, so it looks a little uneven here, so I'm going to keep going and adding dots until I'm happy. Notice I don't want to get too dark on the edge because I've got a little bit of that reflected light. So I'm going to kind of squint at it and go, where do I need to make more gradual changes? And add those in. Okay, skin there. It's gotten a little too close for my liking over here. So I'm going to go darker into the whole of the shadow so I could get some more lines so it looks a little bit more intentional. To the shadow. So keep sprinkling it so it's more gradual. Okay, getting there. Okay, on the lines ones, this is very similar to the lining that you've already done on your project. So like on the shells, you've done grooves and so on. So you can use curved lines or straight lines. Curved lines obviously follow the contours of it. So what I want to do is use lines kind of like longitudinal, latitudinal lines so that they bend with the contours of the shape. You can see how I've kind of staggered them there. And then you can use the stipple to kind of fill in some more of those gradual sort of changes in the value. So you can mix the techniques together. Artists don't always use just one technique. Just like when we were doing the watercolor, we tried different techniques in watercolor. We also, we're adding the stipple to the watercolor. So we can change it for whatever our needs are. Okay, so I can keep working this until I can get, more of a core shadow in here. More gradual sort of transitions over here. Okay, so I can keep at that. I'm not quite there, but at least you get an idea. Here, we can use straight lines. And so here you can pick a direction that you're going to go. So here I'm just going to do hatching. I'm not going to do cross hatching. And I'm going to stagger it a little bit so there's a gradual sort of transition. Right? And then I can, of course, use the stipple to add some more changes here as well. So kind of add the stipple on top of the lines and in between the lines. Put in kind of that core shadow, decide how dark I want it to get. And then I can make some gradual transitions from there so it can look a little bit more 3D, a little bit more round. Okay, so that is linear shading techniques.